live event hosted by Aero leaders who care about what senior living looks like. I'm your host and producer, Rachel Sheehan, and today I have a great slew of panelists with me. I am so excited to talk about the NIC Conference. So first, before we get into that, I would love for each of you to introduce yourself. I know Amber's been here, Derek's been here, Matt's been here, but Jake has not been here before, but we will reintroduce if that's okay. So Amber, do you want to start off and tell us who you are and what you do for Aero?
Sure. I'm Amber Moore. Hi, guys. I'm our Managing Director of Human Resources. So I work with our lovely payroll, recruiting teams, regional HR, and then I also have a lot of involvement with our work on the Archer.
Derek, long time no see.
Hey again, it's great to be here after last week. I'm Derek Harris. I'm Managing Director of Wellness Integration.
Matt
Meyers, Director of Analytics. I get to do all of our data fun on the data engineering and reporting and work a lot on Archer as well.
And Jake.
Hey guys, I'm Jake. I'm our financial analyst. I do all the numbers, whether that's budgets, financials, that's with Power BI stuff, do quite a few different things.
Awesome. And you guys were somewhere special last week. So can you tell me a little bit more about what this conference was? Anybody?
Sure. We were at the NIC Conference. That's the National Investment Center. So this was the Growth Conference. So a lot of the content was for operators like ourselves and how we can get to the next level or achieve our goals as far as occupancy, financial, clinical excellence, you name it. But everything was pretty much a growth mindset. So it was a perfect timing and I would say a perfect group to have attending.
That's awesome. Very cool. And that's one of the things I asked you all was to send me some points, some key things that stuck out to you from this conference. So that's kind of today what we're going to explore and dive into deeper. And everything you sent me, I was like, wow, this was really, like, you guys had a lot of great key takeaways. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about them. Starting with, forward planning. So like you said, this is a great time to talk growth strategies. It's the middle of the year. But there was one comment, Derek, that stuck out to you about living in 2026. Can you explain that a little bit further?
Sure. Yeah. This one particular comment, it kind of took me by surprise, and in a good way. I loved it. One of the speakers said that they were living in 2026 because 2025 was already planned, and that is such a simple concept, and yet at the same time, I found it to be so brilliant. A lot of us are all involved in business planning and preparing for the next year. And it really makes me think, even when I look at my own day-to-day workflows, if I ever feel overwhelmed or bogged down by what I have going on, a lot of the things that I'm doing right now are things that I had already planned to do while I was at the same point that we are now, only last year. So it really had me self-reflect on how I go about my own planning for the following year. And if I am at a point where I am feeling, overwhelmed, like I had said before, what could I do better for the next year? So maybe it's just simple things like having a better timeline for myself or better plotting out some of these steps that I'm going to be taking. And I mean, you could go on and on with that. And it was, like I said, just something that was so simple yet so powerful at the same time. So that one definitely stood out to me in a great way.
I love that because I'm a big planner, and sometimes I feel like we're trying to do our projects as they're coming, and it makes sense to think about, okay, the same project's going to happen next year. So how can we plan for that? Very cool. So there was another question at the conference when Stephanie was asked if Aero will be bigger or smaller next year. And Derek, do you want to tell us what was her response and, any takeaways there you had?
I think she was supposed to either say bigger or smaller. And so she gave a shock to the crowd when she said stronger. And that was definitely one of the other big takeaways. For one, I love it anytime someone kind of thinks outside the box. And when you're given you're supposed to choose one of these two options and you give a third response. I just absolutely was in love with that. And, it really has me thinking, whether we are bigger or smaller in terms of how many communities we have, or the total quantity of apartments, or the total census that we have overall throughout all of our communities, whether that number grows or shrinks, one thing will definitely stay the same. I mean, we're going to continue to innovate, we're going to continue to optimize. And it was kind of a proud moment, I would say, for all of us when Arrow was getting so much positive feedback from other speakers and even other operators that were in attendance with us. And I was thinking about it, we live in this world where all you hear is AI, 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 and everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. And there's so many groups out there that are still kind of at this beginning stages with it. And I think back, I mean, we've been in this world since 2016 or even before then, just with some of the technologies that we pioneered and overall piloted. And if we were doing that at that point when Arrow was much, much smaller, if we could do it then, we can continue to do it now. So I think we'll always be in that relentless pursuit to not be complacent and always do what we could do to make sure that Arrow remains one of the top operators in mind when people are looking for who do I want to work with or where would I want my loved one to live. So stronger was definitely the best answer possible.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to elaborate too? Like when Stephanie said that, what you were thinking?
I think it just got me thinking about, kind of similar to what Derek's saying, what can we do as a company to be stronger, specifically on the HR side? How can we hire for, stronger employees, have stronger employee retention, like stronger connections with our employees who ultimately have stronger connections with our residents, which then makes a great experience for everybody. So I agree with Derek. I thought it was a typical Stephanie answer where it was maybe not expected, but it was outside of the box and definitely the strongest answer. I think it got a lot of different operators thinking too, obviously we can grow, but growing doesn't necessarily mean you're a stronger company. It could mean you're growing, but you are, struggling with those communications with your communities, or you don't have the infrastructure or policies in place to grow successfully. So I think if we become a stronger company next year, which I feel like we will, I think we're making great strides towards being a stronger company, then the growth almost comes naturally because we are a strong organization that can face, anything.
I love that. And with that, being stronger goes into a lot of staffing challenges and things like that. So I did want to talk about one of Matt's key takeaways was that gap between increasing demand for senior living and our staffing shortages. So do you want to elaborate on that at all, Matt?
Yeah, so I think this isn't the first conference that we've seen it. Like, you go to conferences for a while now, and they'll always put the slide showing what do the demographic changes look like over the next few years? What's we know where investment has been, we know what the demand is going to be, and it's this huge unmet gap. And I think that's why this industry attracts a lot of investment right now, because people know that. But the other side of that is we are a very employee intensive business, and we do not have a corresponding senior living worker tidal wave to save us. Like, that is going to be, as much as it's hard to staff now, it's only going to get harder. So I think that really starts to kind of put a lens on the things that we can be working on now to make our staffing better, to make and to make it easier in the future. So some of that is, how do we keep our people happy? How do we get them up to speed as quickly as possible? How do we attract the right people? But it's also, how do we kind of continue to push that automation that really makes a difference? Where do we have those small bits that we can save so that we can still meet what we need to do for our residents, knowing that there might be less people available to do it? I think that's a society level challenge, but we're going to be the ones that have to figure out what that looks like.
I thought I was off mute, but yeah, for sure. And Amber, you mentioned strong supervisors lead to employee retention. Can you elaborate on that one?
Yeah, so that was actually a comment that one of the speakers made. We were talking about, like Matt said, the tidal wave of residents that are going to be coming in, not met by the demand with the staffing. And one of the observations was that having a strong leadership team results directly in retention of employees. So for us, what that, wanted or got me thinking about was for 2026, kind of to Derek's point, thinking ahead, like how can we have a stronger development program for our department heads? How can we hire strong department heads, but how can we engage with those department heads to make them strong leaders, not just in the skill set of doing their job, but the management of their employees and the culture that they're bringing to their department, because that's a big part in us keeping the staff that we have now. One thing we've been doing on the HR side with our business office directors in our communities is really pushing retention plans. And we're doing that now, hopefully to make up, to keep the staff that we currently have so that we're not scrambling as we see the need for staffing to drive. I think I cut out a bit. Am I back now?
Yeah, you're good. It flowed.
Okay, sorry.
You're good. You're good. And that, I know you were talking too about like the strengths and weaknesses and matching that up. Do you have anything else to add about that?
Yeah. So one of the things, again, during that retention conversation was just talking about the staff and how some staff might have strengths that would allow them to care for, certain residents versus others. And it just made me think, we at Arrow, we do resident engagement profiles or resident profiles based on their likes, their strengths, their weaknesses, what they like, who they like to engage with, what their personality is. We do something similar on the HR side. We, try to get those same things from our employees, what they like, what they don't like. And then as we kind of move to having our employee management or employee, like our reviews and whatnot and trainings into the Archer, our operational platform, how can we better match maybe some of the staff who we know they have certain strengths or certain, likes with certain residents. So then it provides a better experience for our staff as well as for our residents. A lot of the times there are assignments on the, throughout the building for care partners, for servers, for housekeepers. Maybe those assignments could be based on not necessarily just location in the building, but, who are they going to best serve based out of that resident population and staff population, just to bring a more personal, tailored experience to both the resident and the employee.
Yeah, and I know like a lot of what we've been using data for so far has been really about how do we save times and processes that really impact, the department head level, the home office level, the layer that we've really been trying to plant the seeds for, and where I think that we're really putting a lot of focus on is how do we start taking that down to the line staff level, and like how do we start taking that down to specific decisions that people need to make throughout the day in order to have a better interaction. So if they're paired up with the right person, that's going to make a difference with how well they're enjoying their day. It's also going to make a difference with how well the care is delivered for the residents. So we're really trying to get down to that, not just the summarizing, snapshot, but what to do in that like day-to-day level.
Yeah. And you both mentioned like how tech could help with that and help with the staff side. So can we elaborate on that a little bit too? You all could. I'm going to ask Amber first, but how can we better leverage that technology to ensure our staff can focus on residents?
Sure. I think it's finding ways to provide automation to what staff are doing. If they have some sort of, cleaning checklist, what can we do to make that list easier to access? How do we make that list easier to kind of go through so that there's not the mundane like documentation piece? Like on the wellness side, what can be automated through the charting and reporting that wellness might have to do? Is there something we can pull from our systems to do that for them so that then they can spend more time with the residents? So I think that's where I would love to see, honestly, even feedback from our communities. One of the things we always say about Archer is, we welcome feedback because there could be something that we're missing on the core level that could help our staff, automate what they're doing or take some of that manual process off them so they can spend more time with the residents. We've also talked about, doing an employee survey just after a shift, just to get that real quick in the moment feedback from the employees on just how the shift go. So then we can use that data to see, where are we doing things right on a shift? Where could we improve? And that could also help with the employee experience as well.
Yeah. And I know, Jake, one of your key takeaways was about the importance of making data more engaging with tools like Power BI. So can you kind of explain what Power BI is and then how that could help improve things?
Yeah, so our world is increasingly relying on technology. I'm sure everyone watching has seen their workplaces transform significantly over the last decade because of it. Arrow is now using somewhere around 40 different system softwares, which means data from a lot of different sources. These sources don't talk to each other naturally, so this is where tools like Power BI come in to tie all of our lonely systems together. Nobody really wants to manually pull reports from 40 different softwares in order to make informed decisions. This is mentally draining, time consuming, just isn't fulfilling. At the conference, it was brought up how quality and usage of our systems is a major factor in employee retention, which makes sense. Preventing people from getting bogged down in our multiple systems and instead providing them with snazzy, readily available insights from Power BI is one of the most rewarding parts of my job. One of the other operators at the conference showed off a very appealing, custom landing page in Power BI from where they can access all their reports and dashboards. This looked much more pleasant to navigate through compared to the default workspaces that we use. Seeing that landing page made me think about how hooked our society is to our phones, usually for endless scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. But I'm looking forward to finding new ways to make our business data more appealing, to where it can eventually rival the attention that our phones receive. Might be a tough one to beat, but that's the goal.
I was gonna say, don't take away all TikTok because that's my job, okay, Jake? So we still need it a little bit, but I love it.
No promises there, but I do want to give a quick shout out to Dan at Wildwood, one of our communities though. He might already be hooked onto our metric report. I saw that he had about 200 views in the last 90 days. So way to go, Dan. We must be doing something right.
I mean, there's like he's usually up towards the top.
Yep. Since we're talking a bit about technology, it'd be good for us to talk a little bit about the UPS project we've been working on here at Arrow. Stephanie announced this project at one of her sessions on stage at the conference, and I think it would really inspire some of the other operators. Basically, the goal of the UPS project is to replace all of our processes that live outside of our 40-ish systems with the system data that we already have available. Oftentimes, these are paper forms or random standalone Excel files. Matt or Amber, would you maybe want to talk through your experience with some of those UPS projects improvements that we've been working on?
You want to go
Go ahead, Matt.
One of the big things there is it's all driven around the idea of exceptions, or, instead of trying to come through a bunch of different reports, people have a lot of information they need to understand and make a good decision, but going page to page in a report can get tedious. So the idea is, how do we sort of automate as much of that issue finding so that somebody doesn't have to go looking for the issue? We are standardizing, this is an issue. If it happens, present it, and doing that in a lot of different areas. So we're trying to, we have this kind of fairly simple wiring that we're able to replicate, which means we can quickly expand it to a bunch of different alert types. Now we're kind of going through the process of what else should we be alerting on? How do we keep kind of building these out and make it to where it feels a little more seamless? And the goal is that, a community leadership team just said, okay, these are the things I need to pay attention to now.
Yeah, and so I think I'll just add, when we called it UPS, because it's, we're doing away with our, morning stand up as far as what we're talking about is different. The sales wrap ups at the end of the day, kind of how the day went. But what I like about it is it cuts kind of to what Matt's saying, it cuts out some of the stuff that instead of it just being a data dump, verbally, that the staff may have been doing together. So department heads might have been getting together in the morning for a stand up and said, oh, in culinary, we use 20 hours of, labor. And then in wellness, we use this, and there's this resident went out. So it's a lot of information being exchanged manually that doesn't need to be anymore, because we are pulling that information from the systems. So then when the teams come together and talk, instead of it just being this, again, data dump of what happened, the conversation turns towards what are we going to do to fix it, or how are we going to get over this next hurdle. So it helps with more proactive communication and really more of that strategy around managing the building versus just having to report up information to home office or to each other just to be on the same page of what's happening.
Yeah. And it's all about being more efficient. And I love that. And I want to switch gears a little bit into like our operational efficiency. And I know, Derek, one of the takeaways you mentioned to me was this McDonald's comment. So can you explain that and the takeaway there?
Sorry for anyone who also skipped lunch, but it's okay to partake in fast food every now and then. So one of the
Wait, we
speakers-
heard that from a nurse. So everyone listen up. No, go ahead.
Everything's okay in moderation for the most part. No, one of the speakers, she kind of in context said, this is not McDonald's. And ultimately kind of what she was getting at was residents are treated as individuals, or even communities in different geographic areas are treated as individuals. And that was the kind of context she was going into. And that was kind of another moment of self-reflection, because if you think about it, you can go into just about any McDonald's anywhere in the US, and usually the menu is going to be the same. The same meals will be the same numbers. The price may change a little bit depending on where you're going, but for the most part, you've got the menu, and even the taste of the food, things like that. You get just about the same experience no matter what McDonald's you're at. And I think what I love about that McDonald's mentality, though, is the standardization and the configuration standards that they have in place at McDonald's to make sure that you're not putting too much ketchup or mustard on something, or how many pickles go on a cheeseburger. They do these things for a reason so that they can operate more effectively. So I kind of love the McDonald's reference, and then also agree that we necessarily can't. So I guess to go a little bit deeper into that, not to compare Arrow to McDonald's, I'm most certainly not doing that, but you could walk into any of our communities and say, if you are a nurse like me, and you should be able to log into Point Click Care and have the same configuration in that electronic health record system at any community that you go into. You'll have the same medication pass times if you are passing medications. The incident report configuration, everything is literally the same, outside of a few small examples where we have state-specific regulations that we're abiding by. But for the most part, the company standards are all alike. If it's a community that has physical charts for the residents, if you see a navy blue binder, that one is for a assisted living resident. When you open up that binder, you will see the same tab dividers at just about all of our communities that use charts, so that you'll know whatever you're looking for, where to go to find it. If you are using our nurse call system, we use the same configuration standards for who receives calls and when, and how those calls get escalated onto more and more people. And in a way, if we didn't have those standards, as much as the company has grown, I think it would be chaos to try to manage all of that. But then I'll stop for a moment from saying why I appreciate the McDonald's mentality, and why I appreciate what she said about we are not McDonald's, or this is not McDonald's. And that's where it gets to the actual resident care. So the personalization of the service plans. I think, everyone's talking about how residents are aging in place more often, or they're moving into assisted living later. And we're always trying to find creative ways to safely be able to manage our residents' needs without the resident needing to go out to a nursing home or something like that. So that's really that key opportunity. So to kind of recap all the McDonald's talk for anyone who's hungry out there, in a way, I feel like we do have to be McDonald's for a certain chunk of the operation. But then there's other distinct areas where it's totally okay to not be McDonald's, and make sure that we are being very personal in our approach, that we're not using a one size fits most. And I think that's how we'll really give a great resident experience, whether it is care delivery or even culinary resident services for events and programming. I think we're equal opportunity to be McDonald's and not McDonald's.
I love that. And I'm glad, yeah, to elaborate, just like you said, on we want to be like them in some ways and not in others. Very cool. And you kind of mentioned a little bit about the future of senior living, which ties into a takeaway that Matt had. And so, Matt, you mentioned a takeaway of senior living, whether we can meet the demand, or if alternative solutions might arise for people to stay home longer. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think just looking at the gap in investment, a lot of times the takeaway is kind of left at, we're going to have all this demand and we're going to be swimming, in 100% plus occupancy. But realistically, other people are going to see that. Like, we know that technology is trying to kind of enter the market and find ways to get into people's homes and help them stay there longer, which is ultimately a good thing. Like, we are very much in the business of helping seniors find kind of that right solution for them. I think the question is really, how do we make sure we're a part of that? Like, how does the community kind of reach out into, our community reach out into the broader community? I think somebody mentioned this, like the hub and spoke model. And that really got me thinking of what could that look like? How do we start on that journey earlier so that we take advantage of the things that we do really well, but we can provide a broader resource beyond just whoever's living with us?
Yeah. And I know I didn't get to all your amazing takeaways because we're running out of time. We could talk about this forever. But I did want to ask you all to kind of give a little insight of, now that you've gone and gathered all this information and these takeaways, kind of where do we go from here? What's the actionables? Does anybody want to share?
I think some of the actionables are just, how can we take what we've learned into each of our service areas and incorporate that to the 2026 business plan? So as Derek was saying, we need to live in 2026. So what can we do now to start impacting the future? So again, on the HR side, retention, how can we develop our staff now? What can we do to make our teams more efficient? I think as we're building in the plan for 2026, those are really the questions we need to be asking ourselves. What are we doing now that's manually that can be fixed? Usually if something's manual, there's a way to automate it, is what I have found. Working in the Archer, I'll say, hey, what if we did it this way? And Matt's usually like, yes, we can find a way to automate that so it's not done on paper ever again. So I think those are like the big questions we just ask ourselves. And then how can we improve the resident experience with data and automation and the employee experience too? But I do think one of the takeaways from the NIC conference was, improving the overall resident experience too through technology and data, even the family experience and the whole process of moving a resident in and the communication there, even how can we improve that for the future? So I think that's just, for me, that would be what we do, is we just ask ourselves those questions as we look to the future, and how can we put those into actionable items for our 2026 plans and beyond.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really unique about Arrow is that this is kind of how we think normally. So it's not so much a takeaway from the conference. I think that part's validating to kind of, sometimes it's nice just to take a step back and sort of reassess and think about where some of those interesting points are. I like the ability to just jot out questions to myself and kind of have a couple of those things. I didn't fundamentally change the direction that we were thinking about going. Maybe it kind of shuffles a couple things up in priority, or it provides that like extra thought of, ooh, when we're doing this, we should consider this piece as well, or this could help us push this to kind of the next level.
Any final thoughts from Derek or Jake?
I would really just echo what Amber and Matt had said. It's definitely rewarding to see and hear what other people are doing. It doesn't really matter. They could be other operators, they could be ahead of us, they could be behind us. You know what? If we're behind them, we can learn from them. If we're ahead from them, maybe we can share our experiences of how we got where we are today. So overall, I would say it was just really rewarding in that respect.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is like if you have manual processes that you're frustrated with that are time consuming, like reach out. Like we're always looking for feedback on that sort of stuff. So
Very cool.
Yep.
Well, I think we did it. Thank you so much for sharing your insights from the conference. And I'm just excited to see more progress in everything you guys are doing. So thank you so much for everybody listening. We are here next week, same time, same place. So thank you for being here, and we hope you have a great day. Bye.